impeachment legal teams offer stark contrast on facts and what they consider style. After a Senate trial opening so contentious after nearly 13 hours that Chief Justice John G. Roberts Jr. told both sides to cool it, a weary Representative Adam Schiff was perhaps stating the obvious early Wednesday when he admitted they're going to have tempers flare. But when lawmakers reconvened later for the first substantive arguments in 45's impeachment trial, Democrats sought to avoid the kind of testy language and partisan-free brawl that had marred the first day and threatened to overshadow their case. Still, Schiff could not resist adding a dig as he declared a semi-ceasefire. The squatters' team would like nothing more than to provoke a bitter conflict. He says, "We're not going to let them." Schiff said, "The facts are damning. We're going to lay them out in great detail." As the lead impeachment manager for the House case, the Burbank, California Democrat offered an opening salvo to the Senate that topped 2 hours, calling up video clips and offer visual aids to help him present evidence in a direct, if sometimes moralizing argument, but not impugning the motives of Senate Republicans. As the presentations wore on, the House managers, White House lawyers, and most senators sought to embrace a staid, solemn trial, or at least for some to stay awake, forced to stay seated and silent. Some scribbled copious notes, read briefing books, made elaborate doodles, or just left the glided chamber for extended periods before flying back to Washington from the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, where 45 told a whole bunch of bullshit lies. 45 weighed in with caustic comments that made clear he approved of the first day's friction. He praised White House counsel Pat Cipollone for his great emotion before denouncing Schiff and Representative Jared Nadler of New York, another House manager, as major sleazebags. Yeah, 45 would know all about being a sleazebag. He's been one for his whole life. The squatter suggested he might like an invitation to attend his trial, saying he would sit in front of the row and stare at their corrupt faces. That's another thing. 45 likes to call other people corrupt when 45 is the most corrupt motherfucker out there. But 45 also repeatedly said he would love for Mick Mulvaney, his acting chief of staff, and John Bolton, his former national security advisor, and Pompeo, the Secretary of State, and Rick Perry, the former Secretary of Energy, to testify before quickly backtracking, saying they would not testify because of national security problems. Cabinet members regularly testified to Congress about national security issues. Other than the squatter, the rhetoric was markedly cooler compared with the previous night when tensions boiled over as Democrats offered a motion after motion to call witnesses or make other rule changes and watched everyone fail, most on a party line 53-47 vote. At one point Tuesday, Democrats suggested the Senate would be party to a cover-up if it refused to subpoena witnesses and documents that the House was unable to obtain during its inquiry. The squatters' lawyers responded angrily, often raising their voices as they decried the process as partisan and misguided, but mostly avoided the central allegations that 45 had withheld $391 million in vital military aid to Ukraine for 74 days as his allies sought to pressure the Ukrainian president to announce a corrupt investigation into Joe Biden. Cipollone accused Democrats of trying to subvert democracy by impeaching 45 and repeated false claims by 45 and Republicans that they weren't allowed to participate in closed-door depositions or call witnesses during the House investigation. That was bullshit. They were invited, they just fucking refused to go. The White House had been invited to take part, but they had refused. 45's personal lawyer, Jay Sekulow, said the squatter's refusal to cooperate with the House inquiry was a matter of executive privilege, and no, it wasn't. That forcing him to reveal information to Congress about his national security decisions would mark a dangerous moment for America. After Tuesday's arguments had stretched long past midnight, Nadler, who heads the House Judiciary Committee, accused GOP senators of treacherous behavior. Either you want the truth and you must permit the witnesses, or you want a shameful cover-up, he said. History would judge, and so will the electorate. The remark elicited groans from Republicans in the chamber, and Cipollone leapt up to respond. "The only one who should be embarrassed, Nadler, is you, for the way you've addressed his body. This is the United States Senate. You're not in charge here." Technically, he was in charge. It prompted a rare chiding from Chief Justice Roberts, whose role presiding over the trial's largely ceremonial, implored both sides to remember that they are addressing the world's greatest deliberative body. Schiff downplayed the fiery exchange Wednesday morning, but made it clear to reporters that he, not Nadler, who stood beside him, would respond to their questions around the Capitol. Some Democrats vented privately about the late-night episode of Nadler's role in a Senate rules fight that became a toxic exchange. Nadler is exactly what the White House lawyers were hoping for, someone who caters to the Manhattan chattering class but is politically tone-deaf about the rest of the country, said one Democratic Senate aide. Every other manager has been the opposite of that, but Nadler is what faux news dreams about. Republicans said that they were still livid about Naylor's remark when they returned to the chamber Wednesday afternoon. I am covering up nothing, Lindsey Graham said. Yeah, you are. You're bouncing up and down on Donald's dick and lying for him. That's covering up. So exposing your hatred of this squatter to the point that we're actually exposing your hatred of everybody. If the point was to go on for 13 hours to no apparent purpose and to alienate the very senators that they're trying to convince, then I'd say it was a raging success on their part, said Senator Josh Hawley, who's a Republican from Missouri. But if the point was to try to convince people, I think they're off to a terrible start. 45's critics were similarly unimpressed with the squatters' lawyers. Like, for me, I wasn't impressed with them either. I had assumed the squatters' legal team would be reluctant to tell outright lies in front of the Chief Justice, which they did. I was wrong. Tweeted Lawrence Trabick, constitutional scholar at Harvard Law School. If there's any unfairness in these proceedings, it's an astounding mismatch between the high skill and preparation of the House managers and the rambling, dissembling, and gaslighting of 45's counsel, tweeted George Conway, the conservative attorney and outright spoken critic of 45, who was married to the White House counselor Smelly and con job.